He leaned on the school fence and said, "Daddy's here." Lily's fingers slid into Veronica's, and her eyes found Kade. "Daddy," she whispered, to the man who wasn't supposed to be, and the man who just might be. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe, tap like, and share this video. The more voices we reach, the louder these stories become. The first time Veronica saw him, he was crouched on one knee in the grocery aisle, blotting chocolate milk with his own jacket as if somebody had spilled the night sky and he'd decided to rescue the stars. Lily stood in her blue rain boots, shock-wide eyes over a trembling mouth, both hands squeezing a crushed cereal box to her chest. Veronica's heart was still sprinting from the shift she'd just finished. 10 hours on hardened diner tiles, 1 leering customer, 2 broken coffee pots, and a manager who called her sweetheart like it was a leash. Her red wrap dress clung the way fabric does when a woman hasn't had time to breathe. She tucked a loose curl behind her ear and tried to make her voice calm. "Baby, it's okay," she said. "It's just milk." "It was a tidal wave," Lily whispered as if the puddle could hear her. The man looked up and the store's fluorescent world grew oddly soft, like someone turned down the harshness. "No casualties," he said, tipping the corner of his mouth toward Lily. "Except maybe this brave jacket. It'll survive, though. It's done worse shifts." He dabbed one more dark crescent off the linoleum, then leaned back to give Veronica room. He had steady hands, broad palms, careful. A field notebook peeped from his pocket, edges furred. He smelled faintly of sawdust and rain. "You don't have to do that," Veronica said, fighting the impulse to apologize to the entire aisle, to the cashier, to the late afternoon itself for not being simpler. He shrugged. "I was passing by with granola and an unrealistic belief in gravity." Lily sniffled. "My shoe is sticky." "Permission to assist?" he asked, looking at Veronica first, not pushing past her, not assuming. She nodded, caught off guard by the courtesy. He crouched again, lifted Lily's small foot with both hands like a ceremony, and loosened the gummed lace. "We're going to detangle this sugar knot," he murmured, a kind of bedtime tone that made Veronica's throat go thick. "Sugar knots look strong, but they give up if you're patient." Lily watched him the way children watch people deciding who to be. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lily. I'm Kade." He glanced up at Veronica again, eyes warm, waiting for her name as if it mattered. "Veronica," she said, and heard how it landed in the space. Too formal, too done. She was used to being V or worse, "Hey you." In a kitchen that never met a woman it didn't try to flatten. "Thank you, Kade, really." "Team effort," he said, "and gravity owes us." He finished the knot, double-looped it, then tapped the toe. "Try that." Lily stomped experimentally and found that the world held. Then, quite suddenly, she leaned forward and wrapped her arms around his neck in a spontaneous hug that made Veronica's lungs forget themselves. It was the kind of hug Lily reserved for stuffed animals and the grandmother who lived 3 states and 2 impossible bus rides away. "Thank you," Lily said into his collar. Then she pulled back, looked him dead in the eyes, and did the thing children do that remakes the air. She told a truth too big for adults to say without breaking. "I wish I had a daddy like you." Silence flared, clean, white, relentless. The distant beep of a price scanner seemed rude. Somewhere, a cart squeaked a confession. Kade's face didn't flinch. He held the moment with both hands the way he had held Lily's foot, carefully. He didn't rush to fill it with an easy joke or a diluted kindness. He just nodded once, as if the sentence had weight and deserved to be set down gently. Veronica felt the old panic rise, hot, shame-tasting, not because of Lily's words, but because of the history that made them possible. She could already feel the eyes, real or imagined. She could feel judgment curling like smoke toward the sprinklers. She wanted to scoop Lily up and sprint down the bread aisle and hide in the cheap tortillas. She wanted to apologize for the way the world can be. "Hey," Kade said softly, directing the sound to both of them without pretending he could fix everything. "You've got a good mom, I can tell." Veronica swallowed. "We're a 2-woman circus." "Best kind," he said. "You get to choose the music." Lily, oblivious to adult undertows, beamed, catastrophe forgotten. "Can we get the Star cereal?" she asked Veronica, holding up the box now dented like a moon. "It's on sale." "Budget captains approve," Kade said, and Lily laughed, the aisle forgiving them all. At the register, Veronica fished for her card with the tremor of the just barely making it. She loathed that tremor, the way it telegraphed scarcity, the way it felt like begging to stay afloat. When the total flashed, not terrible but unkind, a flush climbed her chest. Before she could slide the card, Kade spoke to the cashier, softly, matter-of-fact, no theatrics. "Can you add the jacket to mine? It caught some milk." Veronica bristled. "You don't need to." "I want to," he said, and held her eyes in a way that wasn't conquest, wasn't charity. It was something like recognition. Consider it a tax refund from gravity. A protest rose, pride and fear braided tight, then unravelled under the cashier's impatient blink. Veronica let it happen because sometimes letting a good thing happen is braver than refusing it. "Thank you," she said, quieter than she wished. Outside, the sky was silver and undecided. Summer wasn't done, but there was a new edge to the breeze, like a note you can't unhear once it's there. Lily skipped ahead, splashing every phantom puddle. Veronica fell into step beside Kade, the cart squealing like a complaining violin. "I don't usually do that," she said, not sure whether she meant accepting help or walking out of a building with a man who might become a story. "I don't usually carry milk with my jacket," he said. "Firsts all around." She smiled despite herself. "You local?" "2 blocks that way," he said, nodding toward a line of brick apartments softened by ivy and laundry. "I fix things. Officially, I run a small shop. Unofficially, I have the useful disease of believing broken doesn't mean done. That a diagnosis or a creed? Depends on the day." They reached her car, a stubborn sedan with a dented door and a rosary looped around the mirror that belonged to a faith Veronica borrowed from her grandmother like a sweater, too big, still warm. She opened the trunk and made a space where there wasn't one. Kade lifted the heavier bags without asking, but also without assuming he owned the task. He moved the way careful people move, a few degrees slower than hurry. "Do you have anyone?" he started, then caught the assumption and revised. "Around? For backup, I mean. Grocery days can be a siege." Veronica thought of a man in a state she didn't say anymore, who had been heat and trouble and the wrong kind of quiet. She thought of the way Lily had learned to judge a room from the hallway. "We manage," she said. "Sounds like you do," he said, and didn't pry. Lily climbed into the back seat and buckled with determination, then pressed her palms to the window and fogged it with a dragon exhale. "Kade," she announced to the glass. "We live in the building with the mailbox that leans because the mail is heavy." "Is that right?" he said, delight creasing his eyes. "I know that mailbox. It's a poet." Veronica shot Lily the look that says we don't overshare with strangers, but Kade had already stepped back, hands up in that gesture that says I'll take exactly as much space as you allow. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and produced a small, square card with a number stamped, not printed, and a simple name, Okoye, handy. On the back, in neat block letters, a note, if something sticks, doors, thoughts, or shoelaces. She turned the card over, thumb on the indented numbers, surprised by how carefully he'd written. "This is oddly specific. Stuck things on my beat," he said. "No pressure. Toss it if you want. Or stick it on the fridge and forget it until 2 a.m. when a cabinet decides to argue with you." Lily, eavesdropping like a profession, called out, "Mama, can he fix the sink that coughs?" Veronica closed her eyes briefly. The sink did cough, an old, choked rattle that made washing dishes sound like pleading. "Maybe," she said, "if I can afford the cough syrup." "First visit is look only," Kade said. "I'll tell you what's wrong and how to do it cheaper. Most fixes are 90% honesty." She felt a prickle of defensiveness. She was so tired of being sold to, pitched at, talked down. But something about the way he said honesty unhooked the panic. "Look only," she repeated, testing the words. He stepped back again, as if resisting the gravitational pull of need and gratitude. "I should let you get home. The Star Serial will file a union complaint if it doesn't meet a bowl by 6. Veronica laughed, and it surprised her. It felt like the first real breath she'd taken since Tuesday. "Thank you," she said, again because the day had required the word so rarely it felt new, for helping, for not making it weird. "I've had enough weird for a lifetime," he said, and the way he said it carried a story, but he didn't make her hold it. "Take care, Veronica. Bye, Captain Lily." Lily saluted from the window. "Bye! I like your jacket, even if it's milk now." He walked away, no backward glance performance, no lingering to be invited. Just a clean exit, like a chapter that knows the next page will find it. Veronica started the car. The engine complained, then consented. Lily kicked her heels lightly against the seat and sang something tuneless about stars. At the end of the block, a traffic light blinked yellow, then green, patient as a promise. Veronica checked the mirror. Kade was already halfway down the sidewalk, hands in pockets, head tilted like he was listening to what the neighborhood said when it thought no one was paying attention. "Mama?" Lily asked, softer. "Do you think he heard me wrong?" "What do you mean, baby?" "I said the daddy thing." A small wince in her voice, as if she'd dropped a word the way she dropped the milk. I didn't mean you're not enough." Veronica's hands tightened on the wheel. For a moment, the world doubled, the right now and the long ago, a slammed door, a too loud laugh, a slow apology that never paid rent. "I know you didn't," she said, keeping her voice even. "You told the truth you felt. That's allowed." "I liked how he tied my shoe." "Me too," Veronica whispered, more to herself than to Lily. At the next corner, the mailbox leaned exactly as advertised. Veronica pulled over, blinkers clicking like a nervous heart, and took the card from the console where she'd slipped it. She ran her thumb over the pressed numbers again, Okoye handy, and felt a strange steadiness rise. Not rescue, not magic, just a number that might mean a sink stops coughing, or a door stops sticking, or a night feels less like a cliff. She slid the card behind a cracked phone case photo of Lily in the pumpkin patch and pulled away from the curb. The sky opened a little, enough for light to find them through the smudged windshield. In the rear view, Lily watched the world with a look Veronica recognized. Hopeful, wary, stubborn. At the next red light, Veronica whispered, "I wish," and then stopped, surprised by the weight of the word. Wishes cost energy. Wishes made you want. But the light turned green and she said the rest, quiet just for the car. "I wish good men didn't feel like accidents." The sedan rolled forward. Somewhere behind them, a man with a ruined jacket and careful hands folded himself back into the rhythm of the evening. Somewhere ahead, a sink waited to cough, a door to stick, a knot to give. And between those somewheres, a sentence hung in the air, small, brave, irreversible. "I wish I had a daddy like you." Don't forget to subscribe for more intense cinematic love stories. Your click helps us make the next chapter. The sink coughed 3 times before surrendering to a thin thread of brown water, and Veronica decided that humiliation had a sound. She set the last plate in the rack and leaned her hip against the counter. The red wrap dress traded for her softest black tee and shorts that never saw daylight. The apartment hummed its tired lullaby. Fridge rattle, upstairs neighbour's elliptical machine, Lily's cartoon giggles from the couch. She glanced at the card on the fridge, held in place by a magnet shaped like a lemon. Okoye handy. If something sticks, doors, thoughts, or shoelaces. "Baby?" Veronica called. "Pause it. Teeth and pyjamas." Lily groaned into a pillow, then slid off the couch with dramatic flop energy. "My tooth is wiggly again." "Brush what you want to keep," Veronica said, the line her grandmother had used, steeling herself for the next 10 years of convincing a small human to do obvious things. In the bathroom, the faucet squealed and coughed as if choking on its history. Veronica dried her hands on a towel, clean in the way that happens when you decide it is. The apartment door stuck when she tried to open it to air the place out. The jam had swollen with summer and stayed a size too big. She pressed her palm to the wood, feeling the thickness there, the way a cheap door can turn a room into a question you have to argue with. "Just breathe," she told the door, then laughed at herself. On the fridge, the card waited. She hated needing anything. She especially hated needing a man who had been kind in public, who had seen her daughter's want and treated it like a fragile egg that he carried without cracking. She dialed before she could talk herself out of it, phone cool against her cheek, heartbeat absurdly loud. "Okoye," the voice came, warm and even. "Hi, it's Veronica, from the milk disaster." A smile travelled through the line. "Captain Lily's mom." "That's me. Is the look-only policy still valid?" "Always. What's stuck? The sink, the door, everything, if I'm being honest. We can start with plumbing and wood. I'll bring a wrench and some patience." She almost said, "You'll need plenty of both," but she bit it down. "We're home. Lily goes to bed at 8. I can swing by in 20 or tomorrow morning." 20 felt like admitting urgency. Tomorrow felt like pretending the sink would behave for 12 more hours. Tonight is good. See you soon, he said, and she heard the click, not as an ending, but as a small agreement with the universe. She looked at herself in the microwave door reflection, the curve of her hip, the fullness that men at the diner thought entitled them to certain sentences. She did not want to perform for kindness. She yanked her tea down and told herself that bodies that work hard deserve softness too. Lily padded back in, teeth minty, pyjama pants covered in cartoon clouds. Who was that? Kade, Veronica said, bracing. Lily brightened like a light switch. The shoe tire. The very one. He's going to look at the sink and the door. Can I watch? If you ask questions like a scientist and don't touch tools, I will ask 100. Maybe fewer. A knock came, polite and 2-count gentle. The door resisted, then surrendered with a sound that made Kade tilt his head before he even saw the frame. Hey, Kade said. He wore the same charcoal jacket, but clean, over a soft grey tee and jeans. A small toolbox hung from his hand like it weighed nothing. The apartment felt suddenly smaller and somehow steadier. Welcome to our empire, Veronica said, stepping back. We have a leaning mailbox and a coughing sink. And clouds on our pants, he added to Lily, who twirled for approval. First order of business, he said, kneeling by the under-sink cabinet. Permission to invade the dark underworld of pipes? Veronica gestured with a flourish that tried to hide the unease of letting someone else see the guts of what you hold together. He opened the cabinet, flicked on a headlamp he'd pulled from his jacket pocket, and made a low, appreciative sound. Old trap, mineral build-up, maybe a touch of rust. Nothing that can't be coaxed. You coax pipes? Lily asked, squatting beside him. Only the shy ones. Sometimes they speak in coughs. He explained as he worked, letting Lily hold a flashlight like a job. He loosened, tightened, ran water, listened. He didn't narrate like a lecture, but like a story that she could join, and Veronica felt the apartment tilt toward a different gravity, one where curiosity wasn't punished for being slow. See this? He said, showing Lily a small ring of gunk. All this is time that held on too tight. We're teaching it to let go. Lily nodded as if he'd told her the secret to the moon. Veronica knelt too, pretending to reorganize the cleaning supplies so she wouldn't stare. His hands were precise. His patience wasn't performative. He paused to ask consent before moving a bottle, to warn of a brief burst of smell when he opened a line. He kept making room for her in her own home. The water ran without protest after 10 minutes. A clear, obedient stream. Lily clapped like the faucet had performed. Now the door, Kade said, wiping his hands and standing. May I? Veronica led him to the apartment door, feeling suddenly self-conscious about the crooked thrift store art, the scuffed baseboards, the way her life broadcasted that money arrived with conditions. He ran his fingers along the jamb, eyes narrowed. Humidity made this frame stubborn, he murmured. I know that feeling. He shaved a whisper off the wood, sanded a tender edge, adjusted the strike plate with small, satisfied clicks. The door opened and closed like it had been taught the right word. There, he said. Veronica tried it herself. Open, close, open. The soft sound made her exhale without meaning to. I didn't realize how loud it was until it wasn't. Noise hides in the repeat, he said. You stop hearing it until quiet returns. Lily launched herself at him in an appreciation hug, then froze. Can I? Always ask, Captain, he said, and crouched to her level. Hugs accepted. She squeezed, briefly ferocious. Veronica felt the rush of protective love and the fear braided in it. This beautiful child whose truths arrived unfiltered. Lily released him and bounced to the couch to announce in a news anchor voice that the sink situation was resolved. Veronica and Kade stood in the small triangle of space by the door. The air changed temperature by a degree. She folded her arms, then unfolded them. Do I owe you? How do you? Look only, he said, a quick smile, but I'll build gravity for the door. I'd like to pay you, she said, cheeks warming. Not with a smile. With money, even if it's not much. We can make a plan, he said. Half now, half later. Or you bake me your best cookies and we call it even. She snorted. I'm a diner waitress with a grudge against ovens. Then we'll go with a plan. He shifted, respectful of the line between help and rescue. I didn't come to audit your pride. Thank you, she said, and meant more than pipes and wood. For how you are. He looked away, then back, as if weighing whether to set a piece of himself down on her small table. "My mom ran a shop out of our kitchen," he said. "Everything we owned learned to multitask. Pride paid half the bills and honesty paid the rest. A pulse of recognition. I work at the Bluebird on 9th, she said. Night shift. Pride buys a lot of coffee there. The Bluebird with the neon that flickers like Morse code. That one. I'll stop in sometime," he said, casual in tone but careful with the promise. "I owe a coffee to a manager who thinks sweetheart is a job title." She barked a laugh that surprised her by sounding like relief. "He'll flirt with you too if the tips look good." Lily, tired suddenly in the way children are, drifted back, thumb in her cheek. "Mama, can Kade read Goodnight Moon?" Veronica opened her mouth to say no automatically. Boundaries, not too fast, this is not your daddy. But Lily's face had that soft bravado of kids who pretend they aren't asking for anything. Kade squatted again. "I can do alternate pages, Captain Lily, under supervision." Lily weighed it. "Okay, but you have to do the old lady voice. I was born for the old lady voice." They settled on the couch, Lily wedged between them, and Kade read with a patience that knew when to linger on the illustrations and when to let the rhythm carry. He didn't make a show of being gentle. He just was. Veronica listened to his baritone smooth over the tiny hills of the text, felt the couch springs shift with their breathing. When they finished, Lily was asleep, with her cheek on his forearm. They stayed still, foolishly afraid to dislodge the new quiet. Veronica slid her hand under Lily and eased her onto a pillow. Kade stood, careful with the blanket. He looked larger in her small space, and also exactly the right size. "I should go," he said. "Yeah," she said. "Yes." She wanted to say stay for tea, for silence, for the way the apartment feels right now, but she had promised herself she wouldn't bribe the future with the present. He moved toward the door, then paused by the little corkboard where Veronica pinned bills and kindergarten art like talismans. A fresh envelope glared white among the colour landlord letterhead. She had not opened it. She knew the shape of bad news before it spoke. Kade read people like he read pipes, listening first. "Do you want me to ignore that?" She exhaled. "It's probably a rent increase." The words tasted like tin. "He's been threatening, says the building's improving." "Gentrification memo," Kade said quietly. "They always address it to the wrong people." "I can't afford even a little more," she said, surprising herself by saying it out loud to a man who could turn pity into power if he wanted. It's already tight." He nodded once. "Open it with me here or later by yourself. Both are strong." Veronica slid a finger under the flap because the worst hurts more when it's alone. The letter was as predicted, an increase that made her chest buzz in 60 days, with promises of building enhancements and market alignment. She set it down like it was radioactive. Kade didn't jump to solutions. He stood in the doorway of her fear and didn't crowd it. "There are tenants' unions on this block," he said after a beat. "I know a woman, Marmee, who runs meetings in the church basement. She translates market alignment into human." Veronica blinked tears back because they felt like proof she was losing. "I can't show up with a child and a paycheck that looks like a joke." "You can show up with a voice," he said. "They know the rest." She nodded, throat tight. "If I cry, I'm going to be mad at myself." "Then be mad at the letter instead," he said. "It won't cry back." She laughed, snotty and sudden, and wiped her face with the hem of her tea. "Sexy," she said dryly. "Deeply," he said, eyes kind. He tapped the door he'd fixed, the small, solid thing. "One problem at a time. Tonight you have a door that doesn't argue and a sink that doesn't cough. Tomorrow we find a room where this letter has to explain itself." She looked at him, all of him, the careful hands, the unshowy competence, the way he kept making space. Desire curled low and real, not theatrical. But more than that, something steadier ignited, the unbearable relief of not holding the entire world alone. "Good night, Kade," she said, and the word sounded like a promise to the room, not to a man. "Good night, Veronica," he said, and let himself out with the soft new hush of the door. She stood there a long minute, letter on the table, Lily asleep on the couch under the old quilt. The kitchen faucet held a stable ribbon of water when she turned it a notch, as if proving a point. Veronica pressed her palm to the door and felt through cheap wood and fresh sanding the outline of something that could hold. On the other side of the hall, footsteps retreated. The building sighed. In 60 days, the price of home would go up. Tonight, a stranger had made broken things work, and a sentence spoken in a grocery aisle still hung like a blessing she was afraid to claim. "I wish I had a daddy like you," Lily had said. Veronica whispered into the quiet, "I wish we had a life that didn't need one." And then, because honesty had paid some of her rent tonight, she added, "But if we do, let it be a man who doesn't ask for a performance to stay." The rent letter sat on the table like a dare. Veronica kept stepping around it as if it were a puddle she could refuse to acknowledge. But the room rearranged itself around that white rectangle until avoidance felt like tripping over her own feet. By morning, the sink still ran clear, the door still obeyed, and the letter still said what it said. At breakfast, Lily drew a house with a roof too big for its walls. "This is us," she said. She added a square in the corner, a toolbox, neat little rectangles for wrenches. "And this is Kade's box, so if the house coughs, he helps." Veronica sipped her coffee thin as apology. "We help first," she said lightly. "We're the bosses." "Okay." Lily added a tiny crown over the house. Then, serious as weather, "Are we moving?" "Not today," Veronica said, and felt the honesty pinch. "Put on your shoes." Bluebird's neon had developed a new stutter overnight. As if it were trying to send actual Morse to someone who could fix anything that flickered. The morning crowd came in waves. Contractors with sawdust on cuffs, nurses off night shift blinking against brightness, a pair of women in blazers dividing a muffin like a treaty. Veronica tied her apron, pushed gloss over chapped lips, and moved. "Sweetheart," called Dennis, manager, all hair gel and debt. "Smile up, Tick. We've got a mystery diner today." He wagged his eyebrows. Corporate eyes. "Then maybe tell the sign to stop flirting with a blackout," she said, and slipped past him with a coffee pot that could double as a free weight. At 9:10, the bell over the door made its reluctant ring, and Kade stepped in, scanned the room, and took a seat at the end of the counter like he'd been doing it forever. He looked like a promise kept accidentally. Veronica's breath misbehaved and then, annoyingly, obeyed. "What are you doing here?" she asked, setting down a mug. She tried for neutral and missed by an inch. "Paying tribute to the House of Pride and Coffee," he said. "Also, I told a manager I'd come in and not call him sweetheart in front of customers." "Mercy," she said, but she was smiling. "Black? Like the truth," he said, and she rolled her eyes to cover how that landed. He added, quieter, "You okay?" She was and she wasn't. "We're managing." He nodded, respecting that we. "Tenant's meeting tonight. Church basement on Nostrand. 7. Mammy's good. I'll walk you to there if you want." "If we want," she said, tasting the pronoun. In the booth behind him, a man in a suit leaned too far into a waitress's space. Veronica watched the familiar physics, the joke that needed a ladder to get out of the gutter, the hand placed near not on, the practiced smile that women use as armour. Before she could intervene, Kade turned his stool in a quiet, obvious way, planting his back like a wall between the man and the waitress. He didn't make a show of it. The man looked up, met a calm gaze, recalibrated his proximity as if he'd realized chairs existed. Veronica's skin buzzed with a complicated blend of gratitude and anger at the necessity. Dennis breezed by, took in Kade, and did a quick calculus. "Your boyfriend?" he said too loud. "My customer," Veronica said, flat. "Eyes on tips," Dennis said, and smirked at Kade like a challenge. Kade's expression didn't move. It's hard to punch someone who refuses to climb into the ring. By noon, the rush had thinned. Kade left cash for the coffee, too much, and a folded note under the mug. "If the neon keeps stuttering, it's the ballast. Tell Dennis to stop flirting with a fire code violation." Veronica snorted and slipped the note into her pocket like a charm. After school, Lily insisted on choosing her outfit for the meeting. Cloud pants again and a t-shirt with a lion that had seen many laundries. "We're going to a talking party," she announced. "We need brave clothes." The church basement smelled like damp and coffee in equal measure. Handwritten signs indicated bathrooms with arrows that looked hopeful. A cluster of folding chairs formed a rough circle. People carried worry-like parcels. Mothers with toddlers, old men angry in a clean way, a nurse in scrubs with a name badge that had lost its clip. On the far wall, a corkboard bore flyers for Know Your Rights, Pro Bono Clinic, and Community Garden Workday. A paper sign read, "We're still here." Marmee ran the room with teacher energy and no fog. Her suit was marigold, a small sun against cinder block. "Welcome," she said, voice that could quiet and carry. "Name, building, issue. We don't apologize for existing. We don't talk longer than a bus stop." When it was her turn, Veronica stood and felt every eye without quite meeting any. "Veronica Hale, 42C Maple Arms, increase in 60 days. Market alignment." She held up the letter and half the room groaned like a choir that knew the hymn. "I can't pay it," she added, and the words fell out of her mouth like a confession and a fact. "Thank you," Marmee said. "Who else from Maple Arms?" Hands rose across the room. A woman with a stroller half smiled at Veronica in that terrible, beautiful solidarity that says "me too." An older man muttered, "They don't fix the heat, they align the market." "Okay," Marmee said, scribbling. "Maple is on the list for deterioration, with renovation promised. That means they'll try to thin the herd first. You have the right to demand repairs, to form an association, to request a rent history. We'll pair you with someone who's done the dance before. We will not let them tell your individual story like a failed budget when it's a policy choice." Kade sat behind Veronica and to the left, not performing presence, just being it. Lily perched on his knee, whispering commentary about every name like it was a roll call of superheroes. "That one is Captain Stroller. That one is Mr. Mustache. That one has earrings like raindrops." They broke into building clusters. Maple Arms had 8 people. One, Mrs. Alvarez, compact and strong, keys on a lanyard, produced laminated "your rights" like she was dealing cards. "He loves when you don't know," she said, stabbing the paper. "So no." Her warmth had a spine. Veronica found words coming easier here. She heard herself say, "I always think I'm going to get in trouble for asking," and laughed at how childish and accurate that sounded. "That's rent trauma," Mrs. Alvarez said. "It's like bad lighting. You don't notice until someone opens the window." Kay didn't talk for her. He held the end of the sign-up sheet while she wrote her name, his steady hand keeping the paper from sliding. It was nothing, and it helped. On the walk home, evening laid blue over the street. The city had that weird kindness it sometimes gets when the day's fights are done but the nights haven't started. Lily swung between them for half a block until Veronica remembered boundaries and said, 2 feet on the ground, Captain." "Okay," Lily said, stamping both feet with theatrical obedience. "Thank you," Veronica said to Kade when Lily sprinted ahead to press the elevator button repeatedly. "For walking into rooms with me." "I follow good captains," he said, "and rooms feel less like rooms when you're not alone." They reached her door, the new quiet click still making Veronica's shoulders loosen. A paper flapped under the knob. Notice of entry. "Scheduled inspection," it announced in landlord font. "Tomorrow." Wide window of time, narrower window of patience. She felt heat climb her chest. "This is how they do," Kade said, reading with her. "A parade of clipboards to make you feel like you're on trial." The knock that came then wasn't gentle. 2 quick, hammering raps. Veronica stiffened automatically, pulled Lily behind her without thinking and looked through the peephole. Reed from management. Slick hair, smirk that looked stapled on, stood in the hall with a clipboard and a smile he'd borrowed from a shark. She opened the door halfway, foot behind it. "Appointments are for tomorrow." "Sure," Reed said, sliding a paper up with the ease of a street trick. "Just wanted to make sure you received notice." He clocked Kade inside, assessed him like a piece of furniture, and turned back to Veronica. "And to remind you the increase is non-negotiable. Market alignment." He said it like a magic spell that made empathy disappear. "Repairs are negotiable?" Kade asked, pleasant, "because the hallway leak's been singing through 3 rains." Reed blinked at him as if a lamp had spoken. "Are you the boyfriend or the plumber?" "I'm the one who knows the word habitability," Kade said, still pleasant. "Also the difference between inspection and intimidation." Reed's smirk twitched. "We only speak to tenants of record." "Then you can listen to me," Veronica said, surprised to hear her voice find a register that carried. "Tomorrow during the posted window. Not before, not after, and I'll be filming." Reed recovered with a rehearsed shrug. "We like transparency." "Great," Veronica said. "I'll provide it." She shut the door with the soft certainty the newly sanded jam allowed and turned the lock slowly like punctuation. Her hands shook. Kade didn't clap or grin. He leaned his shoulder against the wall, eyes on her, and said, "That was clean." "It was a miracle," she said, laughing breathless. "I'm going to hyperventilate into a grocery bag." "Then we'll fix the bag," he said. One problem at a time. They fed Lily, bathed her in bubbles that pretended at luxury, and read 2 books because nerves require rituals. Lily fell asleep mid-sentence, mouth open in a way that made Veronica's heart turn itself inside out. She tucked the quilt around small shoulders and stood a moment, watching the slow rise and fall that makes every worry look both ridiculous and sacred. Back in the kitchen, the letter and the notice waited like a pair of bad actors. Kade rinsed 2 mugs, then stepped back as if aware of the intimacy of doing dishes in someone else's life. The light over the stove flickered. Just once, a nervous eyelid. "You ever want to be a dad?" Veronica asked, and almost winced at herself. The question leaped out as if it had been crouching on the counter with the salt. Kade didn't flinch. He didn't grab the story and hold it up like a trophy. "I want to be useful," he said after a beat. "If that includes small humans who make cloud pants a lifestyle, I'm not afraid of that." Something in Veronica softened and bristled at once. "I don't want Lily to learn that men are something you audition for." "Then don't make me audition," he said, not unkind. "Make me apply like everyone else." She laughed, startled by delight. "What's on the application?" "Can you make room in a kitchen without rearranging the person who lives there?" he said. "Can you change a washer without changing a child? Can you shut up when your silence is the help?" "I'd hire you," she said, and meant it more than a flirt demanded. The living room darkened a shade as if the building had taken a breath. The stove light flickered again, then died. The ceiling fixture buzzed, coughed, and went out like a scandalized chaperone. From the hall came a murmur, voices, a complaint. The whole floor inhaled uncertainty at once. "Breaker?" Veronica asked, already moving. Kade stepped into the hallway with her. A few apartment doors cracked like eyelids. Mrs. Alvarez emerged with a flashlight like a wand. "Only our line," she said. "Convenient for inspections." Reed's smirk flashed in Veronica's mind. Fear did its dumb gallop. Lily stirred on the couch and mumbled, "We're a house," as if pledging allegiance in her sleep. Kade looked at the dim exit sign, at the stairwell's thin green emergency glow. "Meter room," he said. "They pulled the handle to remind folks who touches the switches." "That legal?" Veronica asked, anger arriving like a friend late to the party but ready to throw down. "No," Mrs. Alvarez said, "but they do it. We document." Kade's jaw flexed. "Stay with Lily," he told Veronica gently. "I'll check the box with Alvarez and film. We won't restart anything without you, but we'll make sure they don't own the dark." He took 2 steps, then turned back. In the murk, his outline looked both large and human. "You're not leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a fact he was willing to help her keep. Veronica looked at the sleeping child, at the door that clicked soft, at the letter that lied like a policy. Fear wanted to pack a bag out of muscle memory. Pride wanted to slam a window. Somewhere between, resolve set its small teeth. "No," she said, pulse steadying. "Not tonight." The hall swallowed Kade and Mrs. Alvarez, their flashlights making little moons on the floor. In the apartment, the quiet felt honest. Veronica sat on the edge of the couch and put a hand on Lily's back, feeling each breath like a tally. From down the hall came the metallic clank of a panel, the murmur of practical words, the low, patient language of people who refused to be taught helplessness. The lights did not come back on immediately. That was okay. In the dark, Veronica could feel exactly where she was. In a room she could point to, in a life she could name, with a sentence hanging in the air like a dare and a blessing. "I wish I had a daddy like you," Lily had said. Veronica kept her hand on her daughter and answered to the room, to the night, to a future she wasn't auditioning for anymore. "We're staying long enough to make this house learn our names." The lights came back with a juddering gasp at 9:17 p.m. One bulb over the stove first, then the ceiling fixture in a bashful bloom, then the hallway with a ripple like applause that had decided to show up late. Veronica felt the return of electricity as a moral victory, a body thing. Her shoulders dropped a centimetre, her jaw unclenched by half. Kade and Mrs. Alvarez returned a minute later with flashlights in hand and an expression shared between them. Measured satisfaction. He held his phone up, a video paused on a frame where Reed's maintenance guy, cap low, borrowed wrench, stood in front of the meter panel with a guilty flinch like a raccoon caught with the lid off the bin. "Documented," Kade said. "Breaker to your line was thrown. Alvarez filed the complaint to the city inspector line and texted the tenants group." Mrs. Alvarez tapped her keys against her palm, a small, rhythmic clang. "They forget we've been here longer than their threats," she said, warmth sharpened to a point. "You okay, Mija?" "I'm here," Veronica said, and surprised herself by not apologizing for the shake in her voice. "Thank you." Kade glanced to the couch where Lily slept, arms flung out in a star shape, mouth open to the easy trust of a child who hasn't learned yet to clench against night. His face, always steady, softened by a degree that settled somewhere in Veronica's sternum and made a home. "Tomorrow," he said, "we make the inspection theirs, not ours. You set the terms." "What does that look like?" Veronica asked. "Lights on, camera rolling," Mrs. Alvarez said. "2 neighbors present, list of repairs ready, no hallway talk, everything at the door. And you don't explain your life like it needs a permission slip." Veronica nodded. "Okay." She swallowed. "Will you—" "I'll be here," Kade said, before she could make help sound like weakness. "On your side of the line, not in it." The distinction carried weight and respect. Veronica felt the rare luxury of not having to translate. After they left, she wrote "Inspection, 10 to 2" on a sticky note and stuck it to the door, next to the notice like a counterspell. In bed, she didn't sleep so much as hover in a layer of wakefulness that mothers learn. One ear tuned to a child's breath, the other tuned to the building's ancient language. At 3:12, she woke to Lily's hand searching for hers and curled her fingers around the small warm palm. A sentence drifted up again, as if the apartment itself remembered it. "I wish I had a daddy like you." Veronica laid the thought down beside them like a book with a ribbon in it and let morning come. By 10, Lily was off to school with a PB&J, a note in her lunch. "You are brave. Remember clouds," and a promise from Veronica that the couch fort would still be assembled when she returned. Veronica set her phone to charge, opened the blinds wide, and arranged 2 chairs facing the door, like she was hosting a deposition. Kade arrived with a thermos and a small legal pad. Marmee texted at 10:07. "City inspector logged complaint. Might swing by. Don't let Reed monologue." Veronica laughed and typed back a grateful emoji that felt like a bow without the bowing. When the knock came at 10:30, it had the confident beat of someone who always gets answered. Reed stood in the hall, clipboard hugged to his chest, a contractor behind him with a camera hung around his neck and a T-shirt that read something about premium renovations. A third man in a branded polo held a tape measure as if it could deputize him. "Miss Hale," Reed said, a showroom smile. "We're here for your scheduled inspection." Veronica set her phone recording before she opened the door fully, the small red dot a courage she could pocket. "Welcome. 2 neighbors will observe, and we'll restrict this to listed repairs." She held up her own list, copy made for the file: hallway leak, window draft, heating consistency, stairwell light, mold bloom in bedroom closet. Each item had a date and a photo thumbnail printed next to it. Reed's smile became more teeth. "This isn't an adversarial process." "Then we're aligned," Veronica said, surprising herself with the clean line of the sentence. "No adversaries in a habitability inspection." Kade stood a half step to her left, not blocking the entry, not making a wall of himself, simply occupying space that said she wasn't singular. Mrs. Alvarez appeared like a well-timed exit sign and took a seat with her own small notebook. "Proceed," she said without warmth or apology. They moved through the list. At each item, Veronica spoke first. Kade filled with dates and practical language. Mrs. Alvarez hummed a verdict. The contractor took photos. The branded polo wielded his tape. When they reached the closet with the mold bloom, a constellation in the upper corner where the outside wall kissed neglect, Reed made a thoughtful sound. "Looks like you need to ventilate more," he said, pen hovering. Veronica felt heat rise, shame a reflex that had been trained into her by pamphlets and power imbalances. Kade's voice arrived just ahead of her anger. "That patch is consistent with exterior water intrusion," he said evenly, laser pointing to the seam. "You'll want a licensed remediator, and you'll want to check the brick repointing on the northwest exposure. The whole line's been taking on weather." Reed's pen paused. The contractor's mouth twitched like someone who had just remembered his own training. Yeah, he said, half to himself, that's a wall issue. Not a housewife forgot to breathe issue, Mrs. Alvarez said, sugar-free. Reed cleared his throat. We'll make a note. You'll make a plan, Veronica said, voice steady, surprising herself again, and you'll give it to us in writing. They returned to the kitchen. The stove hood stuttered. The contractor jotted. The branded polo measured the countertop and announced premium quartz would add so much value. Reed smiled at the middle distance. We're improving the building, he said, like a man announcing a weather system he could profit from. Kade tilted his head. Improvement's a verb you can't do to people, he said, only with them. Reed's smile finally failed. He signed something on his clipboard like it was punishment. We're done here. Great, Veronica said. I'll email you this list with timestamps and the video link. You'll respond within 10 business days. Anything emergent, we file with the city. She didn't know she knew how to say the sentence until it came out in order, like soldiers who remembered their drill. Anything else? Reed asked, smarm returning by reflex. He had stepped closer than she preferred for the question. The proximity had a history. Veronica's spine knew that history like muscle memory. She held her ground. Yes, she said, stop leaving courtesy papers under my door outside of posted windows. His smirk came back on like a light without a ballast. Tenants don't set policy, Miss Hale. We set boundaries, she said. Different word. Stronger. They left. The door's new hush closed the scene like a book you wanted to keep rereading, but knew better. Veronica breathed, 1, 2, deeper, and sat. The adrenaline that had carried her through began its slow, buzzing retreat. You were surgical, Kade said, pouring coffee into paper cups as if they were toasting a quiet victory. They'll make noise. We'll make notes. She looked at him and felt at once the thing that had been growing, desire like a tide with a calendar, and the other thing that had been renovating the rooms of her life, trust like a beam you can hang weight on. You keep saying we, she said. It helps. He rested his forearms on the table, hands open. We can scale it back if you need to, or scale it up. I follow your lead. She wanted to say stay, have lunch, sing to the stove until it purrs. She wanted to ask if he could imagine a life that included bedtime and migraines and algebra homework and the terror of loving a child you made and the shame of a bill you can't yet pay. Instead, she said, I don't want Lily to get confused. That is the first job on my list, he said. Keep Captain Lily unconfused. That includes not letting my presence blur or pressure what's real. What's real? She asked before she could stop herself. He didn't flinch. That I like you, he said. That I like your child. That I am not auditioning for a role you haven't posted. That I show up when asked, leave when asked, and fix what I can in between. That I don't scare easily. That I've learned to wait without making waiting a performance. Her throat did the embarrassing tighten. Okay. A text pinged, an unknown number. She opened it with the caution of someone who has been blindsided by lowercase threats. The message was one line and a photo. A man in sunglasses in front of the Maple Arms entrance, the angle a little too deliberate, the smile a little too practiced. Heard you're famous now, the text read. Thought I'd drop by, for my girl. Veronica's stomach went cold and then hot, a weather map in her body. She knew that face. She knew the particular way charm can make violence sound reasonable. She knew the smell of trouble wearing cologne from a gas station. Kade watched her eyes change. He did not lean over the phone. Who? Lily's biological, she said, the word sour, half lie, half law. He hasn't been around. She swallowed. He shouldn't be here. Kade didn't ask for details. He didn't make her hold the entire backstory on a weekday. Do you want me to stay until school lets out? He asked, quiet. If he comes, I can be a witness. Nothing escalates with a camera and a witness who knows the word no. Yes, she said, and did not dress it in pride. Please. They made a plan. Mrs. Alvarez texted 2 neighbours to be coincidental in the hallway. Marmee sent a thumbs up and the number for a legal aid who liked to be looped in early. Veronica wrote a sentence on an index card like a spell she could read if adrenaline stole her words. You may not come in. You may not take her. We can meet at the lobby with neighbours present. She tucked it into her pocket like armour. At 2:50 p.m. they walked to the school. The sky had the colour of metal warmed by sun. Parents gathered in their daily constellation, strollers, slung backpacks, a choreography of small reunions. Veronica's heart drummed a warning beat she didn't ignore but didn't let lead. Lily burst out with the first wave, hair turned wild by recess wind, face bright with stories. "We did cloud science," she announced, and then she saw him, leaning against the fence like a memory that had dressed itself up as a plan. "Hey, Bug," the man said, voice smooth as a magazine page. "Daddy's here." Lily froze mid-step. Veronica felt the air contract. Kade stood to her left, hands visible, presence quiet, a human underline beneath the word boundary. Lily's eyes went from the man's smile to Kade's steady face to Veronica's hand. She slipped her small fingers into Veronica's without looking down. "Daddy?" Lily whispered, not to the man. To the space between her mother and the man beside them, to the line the day had drawn, to a future that had learned to ask before it claimed.